Welcome everybody to the State of Local Marketing in the manufacturing industry. We're excited you could join us today. We are going to walk you through some very exciting and important information. My name is Jason Tabeling. I'm the Executive Vice President of Product Marketing here at BrandMuscle. I'm joined by James Morse,
a Senior Director for Solutions Consulting.
And we are very excited to have you join us today. We're going to talk through some key information. We want to give you guys some insights today. We're going to share key local marketing trends, what we're seeing in the industry as it relates to manufacturing. We're going to share with you specific findings from our State of Local Marketing report overall and how that compares to the manufacturing industry. We'll talk a lot about the unique challenges that the manufacturing industry and local channel marketers have. And then we'll give you some tips, point out some areas where you can have the greatest impact and really help your channel partners achieve success that they're looking for. So let's dive right in. Emerging industry trends. So three things that we're seeing that we think are really important to set a foundation for the marketplace today. One, privacy. Two, just the fundamentals, especially through this local channel, how important fundamentals are. And three is this transition from ads to transactions. Let's start with privacy. So first, GDPR and CCPA. These are two pieces of legislation for the EU and California that have already rolled out. California took effect this year, and it's really a key piece of legislation around data privacy. So what we think is really important as everyone tries to get themselves compliant is the impact that that is having on customers. So only 28% of organizations are actually compliant at this point, so a very small percentage. There's a first mover advantage opportunity here. And what this survey is seeing from Capgemini is on both hard and softer metrics, people that are compliant are seeing better results. Impact on revenue is higher with compliant organizations. Impact on customer satisfaction, higher from compliant organizations. So having that ability early on as we move to a more and more data secure and data privacy regulation model across the United States is really key for manufacturing businesses. Next is fundamentals. We spend a ton of time talking about just the right things to do, particularly in this local area. So I wanted to pull up one example. These fundamentals still matter. So one of the things we do is help our clients manage location data management, how their business listings show up in Google, Facebook, and otherwise. So this study here shows those businesses that simply completed more fields, basically filling out more forms in Google My Business, in this case, greater than 30 versus less than 30, and the business impact they saw. So they saw a 25% increase in searches, 37% increases in views, doing nothing other than completing the forms. This isn't keyword optimizing. This isn't making sure you have the right specific words or hours or anything. This is just filling it out. So completion, you could not get more fundamental than that, has a lot of business impact. So we're really still validating, particularly in this local space, how important fundamentals are.
I think it's cool here too, because we know manufacturers are starting to do this.
Yep.
We see a lot of the Google My Business. To your point, it's just finishing it. A lot of them are starting it, they're getting it up there. They're just not completing that and seeing the worth in it. So seeing that value of, hey, stay on this, keep it updated, which is probably the hardest part. It's easy to set it up and forget it, but then keeping it updated to see that increase.
Yeah, the basics is people get more and more aware of how important this is for their search results and business getting found. You're going to have name, address, phone number as kind of a baseline. Right. So those extra, we're beyond 30 fields. I couldn't name what the 30 are off the top of my head, but fully completing these is just very fundamental, and it has impact. All right, lastly, on a big piece, this is probably the most forward thinking or future thinking we're seeing happen right now, is the movement from ads to transactions. So you're seeing a lot of these AI smart speakers pop up, and the implications here are Google is going to be surfacing, or Siri or Amazon, one result. And so as they do that, there's less opportunity to make revenue for ads on their side from a business standpoint, and from an advertiser standpoint, a consumer standpoint, they want to be able to make transactions, reduce friction. So I think you'll start to see this move from Google paid search and cost per click into transactions, paying for an appointment, paying for a reservation, paying for tickets. So in the manufacturing area, there's lots of opportunity to schedule an oil change or schedule tire rotations or schedule an appointment for a demo of this equipment. Those types of things can all be done via smart speaker or your handset device or on the web, and you'll see that transaction more and more over time. So those are three big things that we're looking for overall. Let's start to look into specifically what we found in the state of local marketing. So just as a reminder, we run this report. We've been doing this for the past 5 years, and we're working on our 2020 version. There are these key enablers that we're focused on. These are the areas that move businesses and help them support their marketing efforts overall, from support, commitment, administration. So these will be the areas you'll see us focus on as we go through the survey here today. So we start with this. This was new for us in 2019, the local marketing maturity matrix. This is a way for us to think about where businesses are in their marketing maturity. So on the left-hand side, disengaged, these are folks that don't really seem to care, aren't doing much, all the way up to optimizing, who are folks who are very savvy in marketing overall and are really working to optimize and test new things. So the keys for this overall are two things. One, there are still a majority of local channel marketers in manufacturing and everywhere that are very unsophisticated. 22% overall are disengaged, 31% in manufacturing are disengaged. So high amount of disengagement as people age out or just become disenfranchised or don't really care, focus on other aspects of their business. So I think that's interesting. The other side on optimizing, there is a slight increase in businesses in manufacturing that are all the way more mature, or the most mature. It's very slight but noticeable. So in both buckets for manufacturing, you're seeing a slightly higher amount of folks that are disengaged and a slightly higher amount of folks that are optimizing. So those far-reaching buckets are slightly different than benchmark. But really, I think developing, equipped, and executing, these are the folks who are engaged and want to do better and do more. And so as we go through this webinar here for the rest of the time, we'll talk you through how that plays out.
Well, I think this is interesting too, because we hear a lot of clients talk about, I've got independents, or I've got more of the do-it-yourselfers that do it for me, do it on my behalf, which is a great way to think about it, right? We want tools and processes that really enable all of those, but this is a really mature way to think about it, no pun intended, which is, how do I look at where my dealers, my users fall, and how do I elevate them to those next levels, which I know we touch on, but it's an interesting way to actually start segmenting and think about, how do I support these local marketers?
Right. So where we want to start here with these guys is just to validate for everybody, these programs that we're talking through, the local marketing programs and support that you provide as brands for your channel partners is critically important. So 90% of people, still more than our benchmark, responded as the perceived impact of these programs are critical components to the growth of their business. So what you're doing, fundamentally, they recognize as important for them. And I think that's key as you think about, should we be investing in this? Is it important for the business? The answer is yes for all industries, and even more so for manufacturing. So we asked everybody what their priorities were for 2019. And I think it's interesting to see manufacturing want more digital programs, as all industries do. And the key balance back on direct mail, right? So there's maybe less lists specifically to work on, or less reliance on traditional tactics, but those key pieces really pop out as we go forward. And we'll look at a little bit more at the websites and landing pages and the challenge that this is for manufacturers, as many of your channel partners sell multiple components, and that's a really key theme, I think.
I think so too, because direct mail, I think we were all pretty floored by this being so much lower, but it also makes sense. If I'm a manufacturing dealer supporting 4 or 5 brands, it's really hard for me to convey all of those into a direct mail piece. Right. It's much easier to do that web-based and support all those brands and give them the landscape that they need to support those, to, if you have all 5 of those, 6 of those, all the information needed, where direct mail is harder, which we kind of will get into about how do you support them through getting it to be less generic and more personalized at that local level.
Yep. So diving a little bit deeper, that's what was important for them. Websites was #1 for all of our businesses and #1 for manufacturing as well. When we look at some of these areas of what's included in their programs, however, websites, SEO were areas that are not necessarily as included. I think it's for the same reason, right? Because you guys as manufacturing brands yourselves are trying to make sure that those guys are selling your specific products. It's not necessarily a way that you think about giving websites to these local channel partners, but they're requesting it, right? And they want to see it in their package. I think there's lots of different ways that you can tackle that program overall. On the business listings and display ads, some other areas, even paid search, you're seeing good amount of support versus the other industries overall in terms of what's included in these programs. But websites, SEO, key areas of opportunity, and I think for those exact same reasons. Right? So this one's a little bit of an eye chart here, but I thought it was really interesting to pull this one out. On the right-hand side here, you're seeing other industries and how they use tactics. The left-hand side is manufacturing. And I think what the interesting piece is how people responded in manufacturing, how many more of these tactics that are above that line that crosses the box there, that is perceived more effective. So really every tactic other than newspaper in manufacturing was perceived as effective. And when you look at that versus all other industries, there's a lot more that are below that line. And again, these are perceptions. Measurement can be really, really challenging. But I think the mix of these tactics and how perceived effective they are versus the other industries is really interesting. So they think this stuff is driving value. And I think that's why you're looking to see more websites, SEO, other pieces that drive these through, and measurement pieces will be really important.
We wish all the industries we work with were like this. It's so often we're having conversations of how do I stop getting my local channel partner to be less tactic driven, and how do I get them to think of campaign or initiative? How do I get them using all those tactics to target the customer at every point during the path to purchase? And manufacturing dealers are wanting that. They see the value there. Yeah. This is a huge leverage point. It's just how do we support it?
Yep. So we talked earlier about local business listings, and we thought this was really interesting. They're right, the confidence of this. 60% of folks claim that they have claimed their Google My Business listings, but they're still not very confident, right? You see that 50% of folks are somewhat confident or not confident at all. So I think this goes back to this just being a really hard concept for people to understand. It seems very simple, name, address, phone number, but the confidence that these are right is really tricky across all these different vendors or all these different places that consumers are finding information about brands. So I think there's definitely a training opportunity to not only confirm those other 40% can claim their listings, but also how they ensure and feel confident that their listings are actually correct and optimized appropriately.
Well, it's tough to manage too. I mean, Google does this phenomenal job of anytime a holiday is coming up, a month in advance, you get the email of, do you want to update your business hours for the holiday? Not everywhere does that. And so when you have that conflicting information, it's hard for the customer. And it goes back to your thing. They just aren't confident that they've done it correctly. But it makes sense they're gravitating towards Google My Business. There's more support there.
Yep. All right, the next one here is looking at social media. So how they engage with consumers, I think is really interesting. What we saw here in manufacturing is 80% of manufacturers are reporting that they're using social media in some way, which is still very high. It's not as high as the other industries, but it's in both areas, what we know is social media is really important at the local channel level. The other piece there on the bottom hand side, or the bottom part, is social media support. So you see those numbers dropping down in manufacturing. So 66% of folks are saying, hey, I get some content, but I'm not necessarily sure what to do with it or the best practices. So how do I take advantage of social media and what it can mean for my business?
They're just putting out content. It's still not localized in a lot of ways. It's certainly not crafted towards having that established connection with their customers. And it's hard for manufacturers. They've got a lot to kind of break through and do. I personally love that they're using it. I mean, there's so many that won't even touch it, or their nephew set it up and they just left it sitting there.
Yeah. It's a starting point for everybody. And manufacturing isn't necessarily, as interesting as fashion or retail, but there is value from a consumer side, and you're seeing folks as they start to look at this. It'll be interesting in 2020 to watch these numbers, see if they go up or go down from a usage standpoint as we do the report this year. So what are they using on the social media platforms is what this is showing. And I think Facebook is, the stock continues to climb despite any pressures at 52-week highs. for Facebook, and I think you're seeing visual components be really important. So what pops out of this chart is Instagram, YouTube, the much higher usage than our other industries of engaging or advertising or both. And I think that speaks to the visual nature of the product set and of the way people have their own buying and funnel places through the purchase funnel.
It's interesting too, because traditionally we've seen a lot of TV spots be customized with that local information to be commercial centric, or if you're in the dealership, the video is playing there as you wait.
Yep.
But now we're starting to see all that video content be transitioned to things for Instagram, YouTube, even Snapchat to some degree. How do I post these videos? People are engaging with it for a little bit longer, and that's the marketplace now, that I want to consume video.
Yep.
So it's interesting to see how many of them are actually picking up on that. But again, I think it comes back to content. Is, are you supplying that content for them to be able to customize?
Yep.
So we've talked about all the different things that the dealers are looking for, but one of the things that keeps coming back is that there's a lack of program integration. So this isn't surprising. We hear it all the time of, I have somewhere that I'm supplying my dealers with digital asset managers, or somewhere for social media content. And if they want SEO or paid media, they've got to call these 3 people down in my marketing office. And when you take that and you exacerbate it with multiple brands that they're selling, it can become very frustrating. So a lot of what the dealers are looking for is just one-stop shop. Again, these guys aren't marketers.
Right.
They really just want to sell the products. They want to make as much money as possible for themselves and ultimately the brands they're selling for. So how do we make that easier for them to utilize the resources that are there? And it goes back to, they want all of these different types of tactics, but how do we not make it harder for them? And how do we break through that piece? And I think we see this here more than others. Some of the industries we've seen are a little bit better at this, and we'll kind of touch base on it. Here is that we see that manufacturing is the 5th highest vertical for tech spend. It's not surprising, but you'll see professional services and financial services much higher, which is a little surprising because they're only selling typically one brand. And so this is a Forrester report that came out and saw this, and it's harder for the manufacturers to want to invest in this when a lot of times the brands know you're selling their competition. So how do we increase this? A lot of it is through that integration and putting the marketing spend behind the technology and really enabling them as much as possible.
And that's where we're seeing adoption, right? When it's easier to sell one brand versus the other, price points are very frequently at parity. It's very difficult to differentiate on price. So having brands that are easier to work with, that make it more simplified to drive marketing programs is one of the key ways we're seeing adoption happen when it's brand versus brand through these manufacturers.
Absolutely. It used to a lot be around co-op, but now it really is, how do I make this as easy as possible for them?
Yeah.
Cool. So thinking from integration more to how do you educate them in general, we saw that their marketing knowledge that they just didn't have, or it hasn't been a priority, which is terrifying. It's not even a priority for them to learn how to do this, is 2 times higher than other industries. So we know that there's a hunger for this and they want to know more. And it goes back to the marketing maturity matrix. Is Jason talked about disengage and optimizing, but we want to think about developing. This is where the majority of your dealers and local channel partners are, is in this level. So when you have them raising their hand saying, I want to know how to do this better, I want to be more efficient at it through all these integrations, it can be very overwhelming as the corporate marketer to think of, how do I educate everyone across the board? And that's not what we're recommending a lot of times. It's identify who's in this developing phase and how do we get them to the equipped phase? How do we start to educate just those? Equipped, executing, and optimizing are doing well and should organically proceed in that path. It's really getting the developers from that cusp into equipped. And hopefully, in next year, the following year, we're then talking about how do I get engaged to develop, because
right.
It'll naturally be organic to get them to this piece.
Yeah.
Education can be done a lot of different ways. We see it done through hand-holding a lot of times, or just through simplifying the communication that goes out. We hear from a lot of dealers that I just get one email or newsletter a year from the manufacturers I'm supporting. So how do we make sure that they're getting consistent knowledge and education through all these different types of programs? So this is a big one. The ability to sell those competing brands leads to really a lower corporate commitment, that perception of it. So we talked about they want the programs, they believe it's really instrumental in their success, but they often feel the corporate partners aren't committed. And this is a huge issue. Still, so 54% for the benchmark. So basically you're taking 1 in 4 unsure of any corporate commitment. A lot of that again comes down to, I'm selling multiple brands. How do you cut through all of that noise? How can I make sure I'm the manufacturer that they're committed to, they're the most loyal to, and they want to sell that so much more? We've seen this struggle in insurance, and insurance has been able to elevate that, but at the same time, it's less likely you have an independent insurance agent who's selling as many brands as these dealers are. So how do we make sure that that perception is better and really doesn't equal reality? So dealers, what we see are traditionally following the leads, and again, goes back to, I know these programs work. I'm just not sure that the manufacturers are committed to me and the programs I'm executing. So how do we make sure that that commitment at both levels is there? Because if the corporate is giving the tools, and we've seen this, we've seen so many clients come to us with all these different platforms, and when we're able to put it in one place, that engagement shoots up again. So how do we make sure they see commitment as being there so that then they feel committed to your brand? It's a loyalty that goes both ways.
I think when you're listening to the webinar, or we talk with our clients about this, and we go through that specific stat of like what the perceived corporate commitment is. There's lots of folks who spend their lives day in, day out working on increasing engagement and truly are committed to those programs, but it's not being translated at the local level. And I think it's interesting to see here that in manufacturing, they're feeling less committed themselves, as well as less commitment from corporate. And so all the things James said is key to that. These guys want to get involved more, and there's simple ways to make it more engaged. And I think that integration piece is a key place to start. Simplification, reducing friction is a lot of what we're working on as a business overall from a product standpoint to make this a lot more fluid for them.
They don't have a lot of time. They don't want to invest a lot of time. They just want to be able to get on Monday morning, execute marketing in 5 or 10 minutes, and feel confident that it's being done correctly. So this really leads into an interesting stat, which was probably the most interesting for me in this entire state local marketing for manufacturing, is that dealers are spending less than 1% of their own funds on marketing. This is a lot more than what we see from a benchmark perspective. And I think of it as corporate marketers, if you're spending less than 1% of what you have, you know what you're losing. We know that there's a cost for customer acquisition, there's a lifetime value, and we're not spending as much money. We know what the loss there is. So how do we get them to spend their own funds is typically a challenge in general, but we see it more here. So we see a lot of clients try to combat that with great co-op programs, which really is effective. We see that if they have to put their own skin in the game, but again, a lot of it goes back to that commitment. Why should I put money into this if I don't feel like there's commitment from corporate brand? A lot of it's also harder too when I'm selling multiple brands and you just want me to market your brand. Why should I put all of my marketing dollars into that? And we've seen a lot of successful clients start to transition of saying, maybe I'll let you show some other brands, but I have rules around it. I have constraints around it if you want to utilize my money. But if they're able to sell their entire portfolio or a little bit more of their portfolio, they're more willing to spend more money into it. It's a tough one though.
It's a really tough one, and that's moving that just a 0.5% or another percent will be huge and massive from an investment standpoint, right? You're much more likely to care about the end results if you're putting your own dollars into it. And I think you would see, this is a key one I think we're watching across all the verticals, what percentage of their own funds. It'll be interesting to see this year over year too.
There's a direct correlation between this, how much they're willing to spend, and that perception of commitment too.
Exactly.
So these will be indicative as we go. So when we think about content, this is a huge one that comes out.
Huge.
From manufacturing, we've traditionally seen a lot of sell sheets and a lot of just here, download it, print it out, take it with you. We've seen that start to evolve into, okay, let's put some dealer information in there. Let's specify the products that you sell. But still the messaging is tough, and what dealers are saying is, the content still isn't enough for me to, again, foster the relationships that I have, to continue selling to them, or even create new relationships there. I think we see that through a lot of the social media piece too, is that they're wanting that kind of content across all the different tactics so that they can execute and have those conversations, whether it's face-to-face or if it's over social media. The good thing here is that everyone's struggling with this.
This
is across the board. it's hard for very lean marketing teams at the corporate level, which we see a lot in manufacturing, be able to create content at that local level for everyone that's raising their hand and wanting it. It turns into extended timelines, but this is a key piece. If you can be less generic and really break through and understand what these dealers are needing across the board, that's where you can take those that disengaged and working them through that maturity matrix and try to get them farther along. If you're giving them the marketing that they're looking for. I don't know, how do you see this with web pages and microsites?
Well, I mean, it's all about the rules and guidelines. I mean, they basically want their own website. Right? They want their own content. They want their own social media posts, right? They want to do whatever they want to do. And so that's really the challenge. That's why I think when we put on this, it's increasingly personal. It is. They want to do whatever they want to do because they're the smartest about their business.
Right.
But in websites, that's why for our products in the brand management place, in our website solution, we're really working on approval flows. We're working on make this a little bit more self-service and having different opportunities for folks to be a little bit more customized. And I think it's a lot of what manufacturers or other clients are willing to put up with rules, and what is really the risk? How do you risk mitigate to give a little bit more control, and what's the benefit of that? It's a forever challenge, I think.
Absolutely. We even see it with social media too, that a lot of these dealers just don't want to repost what corporate's posting.
Right.
And it doesn't even have to be that local dealer specific content. It just needs to be different from what corporate's posting themselves. There's a wide range of what you have here from an opportunity standpoint.
Yep.
So a lot of that opportunity is just to improve the way you support them. So we've talked a lot about tools, the integration, but how do they also manage these things? A lot of these dealers are out in the field constantly. So how can I do things either on my phone, my tablet? I don't want to be able to have to sit in an office in front of a computer all day to do these things. And again, I want everything in one place. I want this to be quick and easy. I want to set it and forget it as much as possible. But again, the processes and policies, and we touched a little bit on this, but how do we make it super easy for them? We've seen this traditionally in co-op a lot, which is, do you offer them the vendors that they should be integrating with and utilizing? Do you offer them the tools that they can go through to make this easy to actually execute local marketing? There's nothing worse than we see if someone executing a campaign that costs $5,000, they come in, they submit it for reimbursement, it's denied because they didn't follow the right rules and they didn't have any idea what those policies were.
Right.
And they're less likely to then try to sell or commit to that manufacturer's program. They're going to go to one of the competitors because they've made it easier. So all of these things play into that ease of use and making sure that everything is super transparent and available.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll talk about 5 things that we've seen really mature marketing organizations that they have in common and what they're doing successfully. The first is really identifying those partners and dealers with the greatest potential to impact that change. And we talked about that. So how do you look and how do you educate and focus on them? Don't focus on the outliers.
Yep.
Focus on the ones that can make the immediate change who are willing to migrate to that next level.
Segmentation. Right? Not everybody is going to make you the most amount of money, right?
Right. Opt-in programs, this is interesting. This has come up a lot in the past 18 months, I'd say.
Yeah.
It goes back to that do it for me or do it on my behalf is how do I just come in, feel confident that somebody's doing this on my behalf for me. But I think a lot of this too is data. They want to understand the data. And the data is very different from what you get at that local dealer level versus what you get at the corporate level. Corporate marketing wants to know every touch point that they're having with a customer. The dealer more so wants to just understand how many clicks am I getting? What am I seeing? Am I seeing that traffic? And one of the things that I don't think we've articulated here is if you have opt-in programs, also having that consulting side of it. If I'm a dealer and I have questions about what's being executed, do I have someone to call that understands my business and is going to take my anecdotal feedback and potentially apply it too?
Yeah.
Touched on this a little bit during the last one, which is simple co-op in MDF programs. So how do you make them spending your money easy for them? A lot of this ties into them not spending their own funds either. If you don't make it easy for me to spend your money, I'm less likely to spend my money on you as well. There's a complement there.
Yes.
Traditionally, we've seen manufacturing as an overall space do 50% across the board if you have a co-op program. Where we've seen a lot of evolution is doing these opt-in programs and other types of tactics that work at that local level for a higher percentage. And so you're essentially encouraging and enabling them to do different types. But again, keeping that very simple. If you do an opt-in program, it's 75%. If you do direct mail, it's 50%.
Yeah. I think in this one, it's the simplification of these programs, and also how simple it is, gets that into their ongoing workflow.
Right.
How many customers do we talk to that are like, oh, I've been doing that billboard above my store for 50 years. Like they're not even sure what it gets them, but they just do it because it's what's worked to this point. So as you're trying to replace behaviors or evolve behaviors into some of these digital channels, giving them some ways where it is like, set it and forget it, and this is what I do. It's just part of my routine. It's simple. I know what I'm going to get for it. Boom, 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 boom. Because that's what they're used to. That's the inertia you're working up against, is folks who have been doing these things for years, and now you're telling them they need to do social. It's like, okay, how do I make this easier? I think that's a lot of, James, what you're talking about is simplification, opt-in, and just making it part of their routine so that they don't have to think about it versus everything else they're trying to do.
Well, and this leads to higher engagement too, right? I'm much more engaged if I know it's being done, I've opted in for it, and I can easily get co-op reimbursed than I have to go on there every 2 weeks, every month to submit these things. So it's been interesting. Engagement used to be for us, for clients of, well, how many users do I have accessing your platforms a month?
Right.
Now it's how many do I have actively enrolled in these programs? It's a very different engagement level, and that's what we want to see. It's more how much marketing is actually going out into the marketplace rather than who's actually accessing the site. So the fourth one is the approved agencies, vendors, all the partners that you want them working with. There's nothing worse than putting out content for them to do at a local level, co-op behind it, and then they utilize an agency down the street they have a good relationship with that doesn't have the right manufacturer's logos, or they're bidding against the same words that corporate is, which is outside of the guidelines. We see this all the time.
Yeah.
Having those approved partners makes them feel more confident that they're doing the right things, and it goes back to the ease.
Goes back to ease. The other thing that we touched on earlier is the data piece.
Yep.
So we're seeing a lot more corporate brands force us and their local folks to get that data back. So today they're letting their cousin's agency run that Facebook campaign. They don't see any of the data from it, but that they see the co-op claim.
Right.
So they know they're spending on Facebook, but what are they getting for it? So if you're kind of controlling those vendors and agency partners and those folks, you can ensure that that data comes back. And now you're getting a more broad picture. Yes, I'm spending on social media for co-op dollars, but I also know I got X number of impressions, X number of engagements, et cetera. And you can tie that back to the total corporate marketing. I think that's a big piece when you're looking at what do brands and manufacturers get, what's the value in it for them. That access to data is one of the key reasons that we're hearing from our customers about why they're pushing that.
Right. It's great too, because the dealers are getting smarter. They're getting more strategic. They also want that data because they start to understand the impact that where's my money going?
Right.
So the fifth one, which is just the ongoing education and communication. This is the hardest one that we see for clients, and probably one of the easier ones to tackle when you're going down the list is, how do I make sure that I'm constantly educating them on new programs that are coming up? How do I make sure that they understand the ease of these things? So co-op's a big one again. If I have expired funds coming up, there's nothing worse than trying to submit for money you've spent after it's been expired or do something. All of this education around those programs goes back to that perception of commitment.
Yep.
If you communicate this and you educate, let them know how and why they should be doing these things, then it leads to higher engagement and that perception of commitment, which we then know leads to more money they're spending out of their pocket.
Right. Absolutely true.
So the next step is just watch the email for links to additional resources. We'll be sending out the state of local marketing in manufacturing, as well as the local channel marketing maturity matrix. This is a really easy assessment you can go through. It takes 5 to 10 minutes tops. And it really helps understand how you're performing against other industries and companies within your industry as well. And it helps facilitate all this data to feed back to you guys each year to let us know exactly how we're evolving and how this is going.
Yep. And there's a lot more detail in the full report, right? We try to make sure we hit on some of the highlights, but you'll see a lot more as you look through the full detailed report. So we crushed it, James. We're ahead of time. I think we got time for at least a couple of questions.
Good.
So just give it a second. If you have any questions, certainly feel free to put them in the chat. We'll get those over to us. I think to kick it off, to get it started, we wanted to ask James a question and say, like, what if you were to give these folks like one thing, what is the most successful thing you're seeing people do to start increasing engagement at the local level?
The biggest thing is, I kind of hit on this, was manufacturers changing that 50-50 co-op eligibility. It's been done, it's been a best practice that they've all known about. Since everything's turning so data-centric, we can actually see where these dealers are putting their funds, how much they're spending on tactics overall, because they're still submitting claims even though they might be past their point of getting the full 50%. So we know how much they're spending on all these things. But a lot of our clients are actually starting to change that percentage and really enable and reinforce that better behavior. So if you are showing my brand more so than the competitive brands, I might give you a little bit more money. If it's just my brand, I'm going to give you a higher percent.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of engagement around that, and when they're covering more of the cost, those dealers are sticking with those manufacturers over time and ultimately spending more money with them.
Okay, we got one question coming in. The question is, how do I do sell multiple brands. A lot of my dealers sell multiple brands. How do I ensure that my brand is the one that gets the traffic? So I'll take a stab at this one first. I think this is a real challenge, certainly, but one of the things that we're seeing is driving a specific media landing page. So if you think about digital media, is the key way to kind of control this. If you're doing a Facebook ad and you're letting your dealers drive their traffic to their website, you're gonna lose, right? Or you have the potential to lose. So we're having a lot more of our folks working with us to develop campaign-specific landing pages. These provide two key value points, really three. One is you can control the brand experience and have it call out the call to action, right? If you go to the dealer website, there's many things it could do, but the landing page will call out specifically what the action is you want them to take. Two will be the actual data that you can get back. And three is the controlling of that message and throughput. So you're able to get, whether it be a lead form that they fill out or contact us, get directions, whatever that conversion event is, I think those are going to be key. So it's the experience you're controlling, it's the data you get back, and it's the lead form or that experience piece that I think is important. So those are I think the biggest thing that I've seen. Anything you would add to that?
I think we've seen just a huge lift in those conversions as well by being that specific. Like that's where, as a consumer, if I'm being driven to a place based off of ads I've seen,
right,
I want that experience to be consistent. I'm gonna bounce real quick. Once I have that consistent experience, then I'm more likely to fill out that lead form, whatever it is, pick up the phone and call somebody, and we've certainly seen that in practice.
Yeah, and so that's another one. When we go back to those 5 things we talked about, approved vendors, right? You can control that experience more easily when you're saying these are the steps you need to follow. You're going to use this landing page. It's going to be tagged with these tracking codes. We're going to get the data in this way. You can understand that thing a little bit more. And it doesn't necessarily have to be one vendor. It can be multiple, but enough where you're controlling the experience and the end output, I think is the recommendation we would have.
Especially in digital too, I think we see dealers, insurance agents, franchisees, no matter what it is, they know they need to do this. They're more willing to take the constraints that you give them because they're just not as comfortable here. So if you have those recommendations on how to do these programs, they're less likely to go rogue on these types of things than they would be a flyer or a direct mail piece that they can manipulate. This is where we do see, again, a lift in engagement.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. State of Local Marketing in Manufacturing. We hope to see you again soon. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. Otherwise, thanks for your time. Have a great afternoon.